Vanguard, Fenris Creations' most recent attempt to bring on-the-ground FPS gameplay to the massive shared persistent universe of EVE Online, has changed quite a bit since I first laid hands on it last year. From the presentation to the basic movement and gunplay, it's becoming a lot clearer what exactly our disposable war clones will be doing on the wreckage-strewn surfaces of EVE's countless planets, and how that will translate back to Avalon, the flotilla where our consciousness exists between missions. I got a chance to play the latest build, which is launching to the public today as Operation Avalon, in a closed playtest with a handful of devs and VIPs, and talked to game director Scott Davis and creative lead Jamie Stanton about what's coming. The big news? If all goes according to plan, Vanguard will be connecting up to EVE Online, the spaceship MMO, 24/7 by the end of this year.
We're actually going to see a lot of collaboration and infighting happening between EVE Online and Vanguard, as we'll be seeing maybe corporations in EVE Online creating Vanguard wings.
Recruitment drives.
Yeah, recruitment drives.
That's just over the galactic horizon though. Operation Avalon is a more focused slice of what's coming.
No prototypes, no placeholder now. This is the game looking and playing like we want it to.
While Fenris previously hesitated to use the term extraction shooter, that's very much the core of the game mode at the moment. You beam down to the planet in a clone body, try to collect as many resources as possible, and then beam out before you get annihilated by other players or the NPC baddies of Mordu's Legion guarding the juiciest loot. There's no closing circle and no victory royale, just the promise of higher risk for higher rewards.
So yes, you are a war clone. A war clone is something that was created around the time of the game that we made previously called Dust 514. You are essentially like an immortal mercenary. So your mind is stored, on like a hard drive, which we call the Resonant Garden. So the minds of all of these war clones are stored there, and when you deploy to the surface, your mind gets sort of transferred and printed into the mind of this war clone. You step out into the world and you kind of do whatever you have to do. And when you're done, you extract through something called a harmonic bridge, which is where your stuff is like transported back to your ship, and your mind is transported back to the Resonant Garden. So your mind and everything that you've experienced is sort of persists across these sessions, but your sort of the biological matter of your clone is being destroyed every time, either by you being killed in the field or by you extracting.
There's a palpable tension built into every moment that fits very much with EVE's ruthless universe. Even opening a container triggers a short waiting period in which every piece of loot is revealed one at a time. You're vulnerable during this entire process, and I definitely found myself saying, "Come on, come on," out loud while gunfire echoed somewhere nearby. Player snipers could be hiding anywhere, so thinking about sight lines and how to get from one structure to the next is always challenging. Operation Avalon takes place on a new handcrafted map with some randomized elements, and this is part of how Vanguard helps ease you in. Different points of interest are labeled based on the difficulty of NPCs who spawn there and, in turn, how good the loot you might find is. And while a griefer could certainly camp the lower level areas just to be a pain in the butt, they aren't going to get much out of it since their prey won't be carrying particularly good loot. So if you want to farm up some better gear and get your head around the mechanics scavenging the outskirts, I found that's a pretty low stakes playstyle. You're never completely out of danger, the whole map is PvP enabled, but you can stock up on the basics and beam out with a little bit of vigilance. This scales all the way up to more treacherous areas that might require a key card from elsewhere on the map to open, featuring the toughest NPCs and the most competition for highly valuable loot. The command block at the northwest corner felt almost like a high-level raid area, full of elites that I wasn't equipped to deal with. Even with a couple allies, I didn't make it much further than the front door. And that's where Vanguard's progression kicks in. Like EVE Online, you lose everything your clone is carrying when you die, but that's just part of the job for a Vanguard. One successful trip down and back can bring you valuable resources and, more importantly, blueprints. You might lose a gun, but as long as you have the blueprint for that gun, you can keep manufacturing copies of it back in orbit using basic materials from mining and common containers. Industry is a part of Vanguard too. Aside from better guns, there's a system for crafting chipsets, which are equipable perks that can combine to make something almost like a class loadout, adding new optics, increasing reload speed, or even changing how a gun works.
There isn't a mining playstyle in Vanguard right now that's as deep as it is in EVE Online. We do have the mining tool. Mining is still a big part of the game in terms of how you get resources to allow you to manufacture the gear and the blueprints that you have. We will have people who tend to want to stay away from PvP, maybe stay on the fringes and stay away from some of the POIs where PvP is prevalent. And we know there are players that are already looking at the maps from tests and figuring out where the PvP gauntlets are going to start being created on the map. So those playstyles are already starting to come through, but that's something that we only plan to enrich even further, adding more capabilities and tools to fit the kind of industrialist playstyle, creating safe havens for players who just want a bit more PvE rather than PvP, and allowing that emergent kind of PvP to still happen on the field and be a part of the tension of each deployment.
At the end of the day though, Fenris wanted to get the shooter gameplay dialed in for Operation Avalon, and I found its small handful of weapons pretty satisfying. A common piece of feedback from last year's playtest was that it had a little too much of a sense that you were playing as a floating gun and not a person. In Operation Vanguard, my war clone had much more of a feeling of weight while still being agile, even slightly superhuman.
There's a little bit of everything in there. I think if you look at the mode itself, you know, games like Marathon and Arc Raiders, very recently, we've been playing a lot of that. But if you look at the weapons that are coming through, there's a lot of Halo, there's a lot of Unreal Tournament. I think when we look at like time to kill and, you know, kind of our animation timing and how we framed the weapon on screen, we looked at Battlefield 6, you know, with a magnifying glass to kind of get an experience that, you know, we were all playing a lot of Battlefield 6. We all felt it felt very good in terms of a shooter. It was kind of weighted but not lumbered. So we really wanted our you know, our shooting to feel like that. So yeah, there's a lot of our influences kind of creeping in there. There's one weapon in particular, which is very, very close to the flak cannon from Unreal Tournament, which is a weapon very close to my heart.
If you want to give Life as a War Clone a try yourself, Operation Avalon will be open to the public from July 7th to July 20th. For more previews of the biggest upcoming games, don't miss our recent hands-on looks at Alien Isolation 2 and Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis. And for everything else in the world of video games, stick with IGN.